In criminalities, I hope I said that right, I probably didn't, so I apologize. Criminalistics, thank you. And they're going to graduate and hopefully work for a federal agency. Aside from schoolwork, Logan also works on campus programs as a career peer mentor. So she helps students prepare for leaving the school environment and heading towards the workplace. My apologies. Logan's current place of work, as we mentioned, is the career peer mentor. And they hope to, actually, before I butcher all of the technical terms, I'll let Logan explain what they're doing with their current internship.
Can I just keep it? Okay, great. Hello, my name is Logan, pronouns they them. My goal after graduation is to go into federal agencies. The one that I'm currently going into is the Colorado Bureau of Investigation in the summer and hopefully fall or late sprints. So my goal is to go more into lab work. So what I would mostly be talking about currently will be about going in court and testifying for professional wear and like what to wear for it, for interviews, as well as like in the lab itself. So I also am a supplemental instruction leader for Organic Chemistry 1.
Thank you, Logan. I knew I would have butchered a lot of that, and it was way easier for you to explain it. Thank you. Next, we have Eunice. Eunice, she, her pronouns. Her position is the Equity and Career Success Coordinator, and her daily work attire is dress for your day, no dress code, MSUDenver, that's the dress code they think they're going to need. Next, we have Dr. Ronas. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to add a bunch of S's to everyone's names, because my name starts with an S. His pronouns are he, him. He is a dentist, and for dress, he gets to wear scrubs, which I don't know if you all have ever worn scrubs. They're really comfy. I love them. And last but most certainly not least, we have Miss Tracy D. Her pronouns are she, her. And for a living, she is a professional business consultant. Her career has always been centered around change and transformation for multiple companies and industries. Her passion project is to be a change champion, helping teens and young adults transform their mental health and wellness from the inside out. For work, she dresses mostly business casual, but depending upon the type of meetings and attendees, the events, and always with comfort and style in mind. This is your panelists. Everyone give them a quick round for me. Also, to help our panelists, we have models present. You will see them in the wings. They are dressed everywhere from how you would dress in a professional environment to how you would not dress in a professional environment. And they have volunteered their time with us to show how snazzy they can dress. Thank you guys for coming and helping us out. Unless anyone has any questions, we're going to go ahead and get started. Excellent. So the first question is for you, Nate. How much time do you spend preparing for an interview and why?
So great question. So when it comes to interview preparation for me, it's hard to put it into a time allotment because when it comes to interviewing, it starts when you're starting your application. I think the first thing is when you're doing an application is making sure you're looking over the responsibilities, you're looking over the requirements, and then you're really reflecting on what experiences you have to where those are potential talking points that you can bring up during the interview, right? So really starting through the application process, but then really kind of gearing it up once you get offered that. So once you get offered the interview, of course, you want to start thinking about what are the instructions for the interview. Is it business casual? Is it casual attire? Is it business professional attire to make sure that you are dressing properly for the interview? But then really once you kind of get offered that interview, really planning out some of, once again, like your experiences and really kind of putting yourself in the shoes of the interview and doing research for the company that you're applying for. So if I had to estimate kind of how much time in total, I would say probably 8 to 10 hours total, but that's over the spread of weeks, if not more than that. So it really doesn't seem like much time. It's really just kind of as time goes on, envision yourself preparing for the interview. So.
Thank you, Nate. You mentioned that you address business casual, business formal, business professional. Do you want to use any of our models to show what the differences in those might look like?
Sure. So in terms of higher education, we do have a little bit more of a lax dress code, as Eunice had mentioned. So in terms of an interview, I'd probably go with our model on the right over here, to where I wear a lot of blues, I wear a lot of browns. It's something to where it's breathable. It's something that if it is a hotter type of environment, you can just easily take your coat off. I'm also not a big tie person, so that would probably be what I would do. But in the cases that you are doing a more formal presentation, maybe university leadership is there, I would do more of a more formal business professional style attire as well. So really, once again, kind of as Eunice mentioned, dress for the day, dress for who you're going to be encountering. But in terms of an interview, I'll usually do that, maybe throw on a bow tie, get a little snazzy with it, but that's more or less about it.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will go to Logan. What do you do to express your style at work and retain the appropriate climate of professionalism?
That was a great question. Thank you for the question. So my style is pretty much more alternative. I like more gothic, clothing. My entire closet is black, and I find it really easy to get ready for the day because of that. So for me, my aesthetic really applies when it comes to like my expression and like how I present myself. A lot of the times I follow it's called PPE, or in the lab, where you wear closed toes you wear, where hands have arms go all the way down, just to make sure in the chemistry labs that you're not getting chemicals spilled on you. Easy access to be able to go to any like eye wash stations or anything like that. The professionalism that I'm going for after graduation will be more in the court sense or labs. So with labs, there's no, it's the same thing at MSUDenver for chemistry labs as it would be if it was in the CBI. Of course, wearing a lab coat, wearing protective eyewear, having hair up at all times. Something like that. As for in the testimony, you want to be very professional. Something either our models, Jerry or Emily, will be wearing. Ooh, thank you for the model. Something like that. When I had my interview initially, I still wanted to maintain myself and like who I am. It's very a lot of jewelry, have a lot of piercings, tattoos, and dyed hair. So typically I like to showcase that with more of classier dress, I want to say. But that's just me. For right now, as I said before, like we don't really have a strict dress code policy, so I just kind of wear what I would like to without like being over the top, I guess. Yeah, that's all I got.
Well, thank you for that, Logan, and thank you to our models. Our next question is for Dr. Rollins. When a dress code is required for work, should the company provide a stipend to employees for this dress code? Why or why not?
My experience has been that bigger company, wife worked for a hospital chain, they did give her some stipend for stuff. I worked for mostly smaller places, and they just let me know what the dress code was. Boss's daughter is also a dentist, found a 25% coupon, so that's what I had for stipend to get the scrubs. And when I was had my own company, I never really had a dress code where we all dress the same, so just dress professional ways for their stuff. It would be nice if every place had a stipend if they required it, but it seems like the bigger companies that can afford it probably do it. Who wants just to tell you to get something.
Excellent, thank you, sir. Moving on, our next question is for Ms. Tracy D. When individuals in the workplace dress professionally, does that have an impact on how they are viewed? Why is that?
I would say yes. I come from corporate America, so I've worked 30 plus years in consulting for various industries, from healthcare to financial to mining companies to I've worked in a lot of different organizations, from 10 employees to thousands of employees. And I think it's kind of common throughout. The smaller companies tend to be a little more relaxed, they tend to be a little more laid back, depends on the company and the role. But if you show up with, like you just got out of bed and you didn't even bother to brush your hair, it just shows a lack of care for yourself, lack of respect for yourself, lack of respect for the people around you. Exactly. So you want to have a little bit of be out there, and I think it does give you, especially in our generation, John and I's, there's obviously a generation difference here, and we were raised by baby boomers, and that was you went to work and you were dressed and you were ready for the day. Or school, you never went out in slippers or anything like that. So yeah, it definitely is. I think it just shows some respect publicly.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Our next question is going to be for Eunice. Where does fashion meet function in the workplace? I.e., when you are at work and your clothes are a function or a fashion statement, and why does that matter?
So I actually love this question. I think when I saw this question after Sebastian sent it to me initially, I thought fashion and comfort. And function to me kind of is associated with comfort, because I think what you wear and whether you're comfortable in it or not dictates what precedes you. Are you confident? Are you able to attend meetings or attend whatever you're doing at work with a level of confidence that you would have if you were to come out in pajamas or in a business suit? It really depends on you and your industry. I think that professional attire varies so vastly from, say, tech to construction to the creative industry. And so for me, I think it is important to find a balance of fashion and function, so you're not walking around in uncomfortable shoes the whole day and you are suffering throughout your workday. You're going to be spending 48-ish hours assuming you're doing full-time work. For me, I found that balance. I lean more toward the fashion, but I definitely account for function. I laugh because there's a coworker here with me. She knows how I dress on the day-to-day. And for me, heels are not uncomfortable. I know for some people they are, but for me, they're very much a statement of my confidence and my professionalism. But it's what you define it as. I think your fashion, your expression, as Logan mentioned earlier, is up to you. And you have to figure out what you're comfortable in or not. And I think when you're first starting to become a professional, you're trying to create this style for yourself. And if you're not, that's fine. But for some people like me, when I was mentioning professional, I'm like, I don't really know what's comfortable for professional attire. I hated blazers when I first started out, but now I love them because I can just toss them over a shirt. I made a joke to, I think, a couple peer mentors the other week, saying that jumpsuits are like onesies for professional adults. And I love wearing them for that purpose. They're really easy, they're functional, and they're comfortable, and they're fashionable at the same time. So I think that it's important because what you wear can precede you, whether that's right or wrong, whether that's equitable or not. But I think finding that balance is really important in order to dictate your confidence and have a presence in your workplace.
Thank you, Eunice. Any models, would you like to show them what Eunice was just talking about? And Eunice, do you have any examples that you would like to show?
I'm going to pick on Darian. Just because I know her pretty well. So, I can't see she looks like I guess, Darian, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your outfit, do you feel comfortable? Like, you look very professional and put together, but is it comfortable? Do you feel like you can run an event in it? Do you have peer mentor things? Here's it.
I feel very comfortable in this. I've got reasonable shoes on, unlike Emily, who is struggling over there. I feel like I can run events and also run in this outfit.
And no, you're fine. And it really depends on what you do for the day-to-day. And I'm sorry, you back there, what's your name? I can't see you. Green time. Yes. Sorry? Al? Okay. So Al over there, perfect for, say, like, going in. I'm not a mom. I'm so sorry. Like, who's a mom? I saw a name tag and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. These two individuals in the middle, and sir with the shirt, these two folks would be perfect in construction work. I can give a story of when I did a job shadowing program, and apparently one of the construction project managers showed up in a business suit, like this gentleman over here in the purple tie, and they kind of were shocked by that because typically people in that industry would just show up in pretty casual clothing. So when I say it depends on industry, it vastly depends. You can at times be overdressed for some areas, and that almost made them think that he wasn't prepared for the job or that he didn't know what he was actually applying for. So knowing your industry, and you can always ask people, again, who are in the hiring process, hey, what's the dress code here? What do you expect for the interview? And if they're not willing to disclose that, then I don't know if it's the right place for you, quite frankly. I don't see why they wouldn't tell you that initially. But I'm so sorry. I saw the name tag and I thought you were one of the models. I'm sorry.
I do feel like we should give Al a break. Al is our treasurer for the National Society of Collegiate Scholars, so he's a board member that came here to support our If you want to stay as model, please go for it. All right, we're going to move on to our next question. This question is from Ms. Tracy D. Have you ever had an applicant that showed up fashionably unprepared for an interview? How did that impact your decision to move them to the next stage of the hiring process, and why?
I love that term, fashionably unprepared. That's great. To me, that means multiple things, actually. As Eunice was saying, being overdressed for a job, that you show up for this construction, for example, and it shows that you're not prepared. The classic one I've seen, though, is I've done many interviews. I hired during COVID 30 software engineers for a telecom company in like 8 weeks. We had to do this, and of course it was all over Zoom at the time, which was new. And I had someone show up in Zoom in a very casual attire, like she is, and like this gentleman over here in the middle of the flannel. I've had that before, but I think it's more so it's the not prepared with your notes, not prepared, they didn't have a copy of their resume. They had brought this, one woman showed up with this huge suitcase thing. I don't even know what it was. I was like, why would you bring that for an interview? It was distracting, right? So, and I've had another guy who showed up literally, which looked like his hair was wet. He just got out of the shower, and there was no comment about it. It was just like he jumped out of bed and showed up. But I've also had a woman who showed up who, similar situation, her hair was wet, she just seemed very not together, and first thing she said was, I'm so sorry, but our power went out this morning, and I wanted to make sure that I was here on time, so this is not normally how I would appear. So how that affected my decision to move them on to the next hiring stage is interesting because in that case, in her case, she justified whatever that situation was, and didn't, we didn't dwell on it, we just went on. It was like, this is how it is, she's here, I'm glad she's here. It didn't really affect my decision one way or the other. The other folks that showed up unprepared, underdressed, overdressed, with the wrong gadgets, with whatever, it's noted mentally, and I think in my case, I noted it, it's not like I would not perceive them in the interview process if they answered all the questions correctly, if they seem to know the job, if they seem to pass everything else. But I will tell you that I had a time when there was 2 or 3 that were all kind of on that same level. And when you're talking software engineers and developers, you've got to have the technical experience. They had all of that. So they were all very comparable, and I could only pick 2. So I picked the 2 that were most presentable and prepared, and the one that wasn't, even though he was just as qualified as the rest, they didn't proceed.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I would definitely agree. That was been my experience hiring as well. If a conservative candidate, someone who was more prepared, is my guy down for them. Our next question is for Nate. In your experience, what reasons would be most likely for dress code to include company-specific logos or phrases? Should employees pay for this extra dress code? Why or why not?
So when it comes to company logos and phrases, I think it's extremely important if you are in a front-facing or a service kind of role. The kind of rule of thumb I think about is like, don't wear a red shirt and go to Target, right? Like, you will get asked questions, you will get, hey, where's this located, right? So it's that kind of, psyche of, hey, if you do have that company logo, if you are someone that is either on a service floor, in the service industry, or just a front-facing role in general, it does allow people to know that you are someone to support. You are someone that can answer questions, and you're really a guide for them. So in our current role, I help oversee our convention program here at MSUDenver, and we don't have any sort of dress code outside of on event dates, where we are supporting events, we are staffing events to make sure that we have our convention department shirts on. So when people are having questions or aren't sure what to do, they know that is a go-to person that I can ask, rather than just kind of dressing like a college student, for which they can do any other day. Now, in terms of purchasing that type of attire, I'm not a fan of having to pay your own money for company branded logos. I think if you can't wear it on a night out, or if you can't wear it for other avenues of your life, you shouldn't have to pay for it. You are literally only wearing it for your attendance at work. So that is my perspective with it. But if it is something that, you're just dressing business casual or professional wear, and that is the requirement, of course, it'd be great if you all got stipends. I completely agree with that. But you can also wear those clothes for other functions, so it does make more sense for you to be able to, pay with it.
Thank you, Nate. Our next question is going to be for Dr. Rums. If the dress code at work was adjusted and you had an employee struggling with the change of the new dress code requirement, how would you approach this individual to get them to be on the proper dress code path?
I asked them what the issues were with changing to the dress code, and trying to work with them to get to the new dress code.
So let's use an example. If we could have Emily walk by. So Emily is wearing closed-toed shoes, but still wearing heels. So let's say that we had a hygienist who really liked wearing open-toed, like wedges and sandals and flip-flops, especially during the summer months. But someone accidentally hurt themselves and ran over their foot. So now the company's decided closed-toed shoes at work. And Emily, let's say, did not want to wear closed-toed shoes because these shoes are super uncomfortable to her, so she keeps on wearing her open-toed ones. How would you politely talk to her about that specifically?
Let her know that the new dress code is also to help protect people from getting injured, and that she should try to find as comfortable a closed-toed shoe as possible.
Yeah, I think just focusing on a safety feature, right? Hey,
And if any panelists would like to add, please raise your hand, unmute, and add.
I've been in the food industry for over who knows how long, and so every time you have to wear non-slip shoes, all have to be closed-toed, and so really what they like to push is kind of like, not like a fear getting pushed in, but more of like, hey, if you get into an accident and if you slip on like already mopped floors, very slippery. If you tend to slip on it and you don't wear non-slip shoes, it's not the company's problem, and they don't have to give you workman's comp for it or compensation for it because it's not following the proper regulations of uniform. So I feel like bringing that up to the employee can also be very important to just let them know, like, as long as you're comfortable with this, I can also give you some alternatives to wear. But due to this being a safety feature, especially like in somewhere like a dentist's office or any other hygienic place, I feel like it'd be more of like, for safety and for cleanliness as well.
And I can add a little bit of less of a safety feature and more of an actual change that I've seen. So in the past, I worked for an admissions office, and as Nick was talking about with that front-facing office, they started to require that their tour guides wear branded shirts and khakis. khakis. And I don't know how you all feel about khakis. I personally do not love them. And these students did not either. They pushed back and they were like, why do we have to wear khakis? Why do we have to wear these shirts? Why can't we just wear whatever we want? And their supervisor recognized, you know, it is sometimes hard to come from class, to come from whatever you're coming to, and then have to change into this new attire. But we're doing this to have a brand, a cohesive brand, and a cohesive sense of professionalism amongst our team. And so that way they recognize you as a tour guide, as a professional, as opposed to a random student. And that way they know to come up to you, they know that you are the person to come to for questions. And him communicating that to the students helped them kind of come down from their sense of anger. I still don't like khakis, but I understand where he's coming from. And for the ones that he didn't get to in like a group setting, he just had sit-down conversations with them and said, do you have any other challenges related to this dress code? And some of them genuinely did. Some of them couldn't afford to buy new clothes. And he worked with them to get them affordable clothing. So I think recognizing that as well is important when doing any kind of change within an organization. Like, what are the actual barriers? Is it just a refusal to, or is it an actual issue that they're dealing with, as was mentioned, someone's power went out, or can they afford it financially? So recognizing that and also being empathetic to everyone's humanity, I think, is important in these types of situations.
All right. Thank you very much, Eunice. We're going to move on to our next question. In what way, this question's directed at Logan. In what ways do you believe non-traditional hair color would affect your chance of getting a job during an interview?
As much as I would love to say, oh yeah, it doesn't affect it at all, unfortunately it does. I had my hair dyed since I was like 12, 13, and had like bright red hair. Thank you, Haley Williams. Like purple, blue, greens, bright pink at some point, and so having my background in the food industry, it really didn't really impact me going into that sense. The problem that I also ran into is like with piercings and tattoos. I kind of like group all of them together because it is the expression of yourself, right? It's how you want to present in and out of the workspace. When I was preparing for my interview, I had to take out all of my piercings. I had to pull my hair back. At the time I had like really silver hair, and so I had to like make sure that it looked different. And just kind of like tone myself down a little bit. I didn't like doing that. Like, it doesn't feel like it's me, and especially if I'm trying to go into a workplace where I would have to do that every day, it might not be the best fit for me. That's why I kind of want to go into a lab setting where I'm behind the scenes. No one is really going to see me, except if it's in court or if we need to meet with someone else about a case, just other random things like that. But unfortunately it does. The best thing I can say for it would be to either tie your hair back, weeds help, because like they'll never know. And then like once you get the job, you can just like reveal dramatically and be like, it's this the whole time, it's like raping. But yeah, I think that it just depends. It was a similar thing that Tracy brought up when it comes to in interviews with having like someone who is not prepared dress-wise versus someone who is for like that specific field. Working with the internship that I'm going to into the summer, I asked them questions like, how do you feel about piercings? How do you feel about dyed hair and tattoos? They told me, oh yeah, we don't mind as long as you take them out for court. And I said, perfect, just my style, just how I like it. So really work with your employer when it comes to your hair, if you're trying to change the style, if you have piercings, tattoos, just everything in between.
Can I add to that? I'd love to add to that because I think I have a recent experience that's good to know because I read this question about, I just went through this recently. I had a contract with a small, mid-sized company. They do low-code programming, consulting, and they have about 20 consultants that do that. And one of the gals that they hired is, I would say, probably mid-20s, and she's got half her head shaved, half of it's pink, a lot of tattoos and nose piercings. And she is one of the most valuable team members that they have. And I was giving kudos to the CEO because he's my generation, and he's a little bit older, probably late 50s. And he didn't let that be a bias when he hired her. He did, however, say that it wouldn't go over with some other clients. He has some rather large clients like Google and others. So she does a lot of background work. And they sort that out with me, right? And occasionally, if there is client-facing work, she will show up on camera with the tone down, with her hair back, where you can't really tell. It's just, but otherwise, it's more of a client-facing respect, I think. And I was happy that they were more progressive in that way. So, but other people, not so much.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I am into this style, very alternative, same thing. A lot of piercings, dyed hair, half my head is shaved all the way around, all that good stuff. But when it comes to my work ethic, I feel like there is a bad stereotype when it comes to people who dress similar to how I do. But yeah, I think that my favorite thing is proving people wrong. Of like the terrible stereotype of like, they have all this tattoos, piercings. I get a lot of looks from particularly someone who is older than me, or someone who's just not really exposed to those kind of things, so they tend to undermine me or kind of like judge me without actually knowing me. So my favorite thing is like, I want to put as much dedication as I can into the company I work at. I am a hard worker, I'm dedicated, I'm smart, and I just love to make a big impact in my company and be like as unapologetic as I can of like how I dress and myself.
Yeah, that's exactly what I recommend too, and just show them that you can do the job, and that's what's the important thing. That's most important.
Well, thank you all for that input. I love it. That was a loaded question. You guys just picked up off each other beautifully. Thank you. Our next question is for Eunice. Say a student came to you asking for advice on their jewelry for an interview. You see that the student clearly has several facial piercings along with earrings, bracelets, and necklaces. What advice would you give the student on their interview and why?
I feel like this relates really something to the previous question. As you can see, I have green dangly earrings. If you see me on the day-to-day, I'm usually wearing something bright and dangly if I make my own earrings, so that's part of the reason why. And it's part of my self-expression. So if a student came to me saying, Logan, were to come to me and say they're about to have an interview.
You seem to know the drill at this point, but I think I like the mic, apparently. So that's what I would tell the student, is break the mic. I would say know your industry. So whether it's going into kind of legal work or government work, a lot of that is very traditional. So unfortunately, what you look like might precede your work ethic, which again isn't right, and I advocate for employers to be more progressive and to be looking at qualifications as opposed to appearances, because you don't know, that person who is dressed unprofessionally might be the best person you've ever hired, but the reality versus ideal is kind of different. So I would advise a student to get to know that company that they're applying for. Do something similar to what Logan did, which is ask, how do you feel about piercings? How do you feel about hair? How do you feel about tattoos? And from there, proceed. I've had folks who are my friends who are teachers. They kind of covered up their tattoos for the first interview, and then kind of slowly showing it over the course of a couple months of working, and there were no questions about it. But my advice personally, and you can take this with a grain of salt, is you can always find a job and a company that will accept you fully for who you are. That includes piercings, hair, everything about you. You never have to actually sacrifice a piece of yourself, and there will always be a company for you that you don't have to diminish a part of yourself to be a part of. If you are okay with removing some aspects of yourself for the day-to-day, then do so. But I'm just saying that you don't have to do that in order to get a good paying job in your field that you're interested in. The only exception would maybe be in lab work, where you're going to have to take this off, otherwise you might hurt yourself or others. So that's my kind of take on this question. Yes.
Something I wanted to piggyback off on was, yeah, it just really depends on where you want to go, especially like in lab work. Rings are a safety hazard. I worked as a baker at some point, and they had a real problem with like my nose piercing, and asked if I could put like one of those plastic clear things to put in it, because they're like, oh, if you wear a ring, it's just gonna fall out. And it's like, that's not how it works. It's a sealed ring. And so like, it just depends on your employer, and I completely agree. Like, a lot of times I get told like, oh, maybe you want to hold off on getting this specific tattoo because like if you want to get a job later, like you want to make sure that you would pass. And it's like, unless I just completely like rip off like my sleeves and everything, like I think it should be fine. And then of course they tell you to cover your tattoos. Tattoos are still pretty progressive, I like to say, in that kind of industry. So it really just depends. If you want to get a tattoo, as someone who's a student who doesn't have like any actual like in the workforce experience, like if you want to get a tattoo, get a tattoo. As long as you're okay with like either covering it or finding ways around it that you find the most comfortable.
I'm sorry to put me on spot here, but Nate has tattoos. I know 5 other coworkers who have tattoos. I know many coworkers, at least in MSU and in higher ed, who have tattoos. So you can definitely find employers that don't care and that actually welcome that and talk about it openly. And I know our AVP also has tattoos, so you can definitely find those spaces. And I also just want to call out the fact that professionalism is rooted in colonialism and a lot of tattoos, piercings, that comes from indigenous native folks and certain cultures that have been diminished here in America. So just want to make that piece.
Thank you very much, panelists. I love how we're all starting to feed off each other. That is great, and it's combining our expert experience, so thank you. Our next question is going to be for Dr. Rose. We all have our faiths. How would you advise individuals to express their faith through fashion in the workplace, but still be professional and respectful to other people's faiths? I.e., what religious clothing, jewelry is appropriate in the workplace, and what would be seen as inappropriate in the workplace, and why? Asking about an employee who came in with a kippah and wanted to wear it for the day-to-day.
For the most part, my experience would be with people wearing necklaces, and usually the religious symbol is relatively small, inch by inch, and well, it didn't stick out, so it wasn't no issue with that. I would assume that any head covering would be okay. Especially if the person's religious. For the part about inappropriate, I don't know. It's not like if the necklace was so ridiculous that it's the first thing someone notices versus the person itself. So they keep it in, not a ridiculous size. I would assume it should be fine.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, when it comes to that religious part, you should always make sure that you are respected in the workplace with that. And if they cannot tie it to a safety regulation, as Dr. Rose said, there's no reason someone should be able to express themselves at work. Thank you, sir. Moving on, our next question is for Tracy D. Do dress codes innately discriminate? What advice would you offer students preparing to enter the workforce who feel like there's an inequality in the dress code and how society's biases would lean that way?
This is a fun question. I read this the first time and thought, oh yes, there's definitely, I think, discrimination when you think about dress codes. Nate mentioned wearing a red shirt for Target. That doesn't seem like a discrimination thing. However, you talk about dress codes in schools, it obviously goes to discrimination or sexism. I think often comes out with having to cover up, having to make sure things aren't exposed. Even ripped jeans because it shows your knees. I mean, it can be crazy things like that. But I think again, it depends on the workplace, it depends on the situation, and it depends on the generation. Again, I think there's a generation gap here where those baby boomers, those Gen Xers, there were dress codes because of the way that females in particular were treated back in those days. So I like to think with the progression we've made that it doesn't seem to be that way as much anymore. But I also think it's an age, a generation thing. So some of us, when I say dress code, I probably immediately think of it being sexist to some degree because that's how it felt growing up for me. Someone who is younger or in a different generation may view that differently. I'm not sure. I'd be curious to hear how you guys think of it when you first hear dress code. There's also the religious component to it, right? And a lot of religions, there's dress codes for religion, and there's respect for God, and there's all of those things too. So yes, I definitely believe that there is, and I think the second part of that would be what religious or what advice would I offer students preparing to go to the workforce regarding how to dress and it's knowing society's biases. I guess the first advice I would give is what my grandma taught me, which is you only have one chance to make a first impression.
Would you care to use any of our models and their examples?
I'm trying to think dress code, the high heels is a little high, and that could be a dress code ticket. I remember working for several companies you could wear anything over an inch high, and that felt discriminatory to me because again, you know, some people feel comfortable in them, some people don't, but that would be probably the first thing I would see as far as discriminatory.
I'd say I've noticed it may get away with in Colorado, but I cut my long hair because I'm in finance. I plan on trying to work in some of these big firms in New York, and I might even have to cut this beard honestly. Or if I wanted to if I felt like wearing a skirt, I could wear that exact same professional outfit, but because I present male, that would not be seen as professional wear for me.
Yes.
It just wouldn't fly. So the advice I've been given is once you get that first interview, that first job, and you have resume experience that speaks for yourself, then you get a lot more leeway to show, hey, I'm awesome, so you can go show your biases wherever you want, and people will find you. But that first interview,
Great.
My hair was down to my knees last fall. Not knees.
Your shoulders. That's really
No, not the knees.
Yeah, my cousin he wears his really long, he wears it in a bun, a man bun. And he lives in Wyoming, and it's not, he has a hard time with it.
There's a lot of rich white men who run banks, and they're older, and they have opinions about how a man should look. So it's just something we have to...
Yeah, and I want to give them a chance to chime in, but also, I forget which airline, but recently there was an article over the weekend that I glanced at that was how the airlines are changing their dress code. And I forget which airline it is, so if anyone has read this article, you can I don't think it was Spirit, it was more of an international airline, but their dress code now is, here is the pantsuit, here's the dress, here's the top, and we don't care what gender you are, you can wear whatever you want within this. And they actually have a picture of I think it's a they in a red skirt and the hat and everything, and it's a little different for some of us to see that, but they look very happy and can do this job.
Yeah, this topic definitely resonates with me because I am non-binary, and so I definitely feel the type of separation in professional wear where there's either a specific gender binary associated with it. There's not really a lot of options when it comes to a person who's non-binary. And for what you explained earlier, when it comes to, oh yeah, this is professionalism, like this is a something that Emily, our beautiful model, is wearing is appropriate for someone who is identifying as female, but for some reason that same professional wear into someone who is either non-binary or male presenting, that's where it gets like, oh, how could they? It's just not the same. And for me, it's definitely having a hard time with finding clothes that I feel most comfortable in, while trying to be as androgynous as possible. And I'm finding that it's really difficult to find that line between the gender binary of professionalism. But yeah, I think that's awesome with the things and stuff. good progress.
Thank you. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is a lot of dress codes are inherently sexist and heteronormative. I think we operate on this binary of man, woman. Woman wears dress skirt, pantsuit, whatever, man wears a suit. There's not a lot of ambiguity in there, and yes, there are some traditional areas where you can't necessarily get away with not wearing this in a workplace. But I think that employers should start moving away from this gender binary of separating like men and women and just saying exactly what Tracy had shared with the airline. Like, here's what's appropriate. Don't even name a gender. Don't even name it. Like, why is it necessary? And I think we've only associated clothing with gender because we created this construct in society. And what I mean by that is, back in the day, high heels were they used for like horseback for men. And in certain cultures, a skirt is seen as a respectable thing for men to wear as a career. And so it depends on culture, it depends on time, it depends on context. And what I think we should move forward with as a society is just recognizing the person, and if we're really looking at it from a business perspective, their efficiency and whether they're able to do the job. What they wear, if that's disrupting their ability to do the job, that's when you address it, in my opinion. And it's not that way in every industry or place, but I definitely think that dress codes come from a sexist lens, come from a colonialist, racist lens, because if you look at, say, hairstyles, like some hairstyles are not appropriate for certain companies, and like long hair is potentially religious or cultural in some cases, and telling them to cut it off is disrespectful. Or saying your hair looks unkempt because it's just naturally curly. Like, what am I going to do with that? And I've had some friends who have had that experience where like, I don't know what to do. This is literally my best kept hairstyle, and they're telling me it's not good enough. And my best to them is they're not good enough for you. So they don't deserve you in this place. And again, it's your tolerance for black language BS. If you can tolerate that, go for it. If you can't, you have every right to leave. And I know that's easier said than done depending on your financial circumstances, but there are always jobs out there that are looking for very qualified, very wonderful human beings like all of you in this room, and you can always find that. And you don't have to abide by their sexist, heteronormative, racist rules for how you should present.
Yeah, just to add to that, it was Virgin Atlantic. And so you would have been airline strictly, that's who you apply to. And there's literally a picture on the front, and they are dressed exactly the same. And it's very much taken. So it's WSJ, Wall Street Journal.
Adding on to that, I feel like it's really important to talk about know your worth, you know, with the way that fashion is being progressed, and like fortunately everything that's happening right now when it comes to someone who's trans, non-binary, and like just changing the style in their expression to fit who they are. A lot of places just are still within that specific gender binary. And that's when it really is knowing your worth and knowing where you feel most comfortable in. Because as stated earlier, for some people, expressing themselves in their identity and how they dress are very much intertwined. And so I feel like taking away that opportunity where they can feel the most comfortable and feeling like themselves and the most confident is very dangerous. And it can actually stunt performance, and it can stunt the way that they feel about like them belonging into a company. So really having that kind of airline able to represent zero binary within clothes, wear what you want and what you're the most comfortable with, express yourself, is very important. And I love the way that that's being directed. And it also shows representation as well, to show like more exposure, more diversity when it comes to having someone who's gender fluid, or someone who is androgynous, or having all of these different kinds of styles. Best fitting them can show a more welcoming environment, and it can show how much the company cares for their employees, and just increases, just makes it better.
That's if I could add as well. Kind of going away from gender and sex, I think dress codes are also pragmatic. I mean, I can give a clear example of my high school days where I would wear leggings no one else than I, but one of my friends who are curvier, they would get dress coded and get told to change. And I think that's inherently problematic in the workplace or the academic setting because you're taking people away from their studies or what they're doing in order to tell them, hey, you're not dressed appropriately and you're distracting other people. Who exactly are we distracting? And a lot of these dress code violations are directed at women-identifying folks or gender-non-conforming folks. And yes, sometimes there are men who get dress coded, but the majority are those demographics. And I've had multiple instances of like teachers, male teachers in my high school, looking at young women and saying, that's not appropriate. That tank top is not good. Like, it's not good to be in this setting. Go and change. And like, why are you putting the onus on that individual to address your discomfort with their appearance? Like, you need to address your inner problem. Like, why are you looking at them that way? Why does that make you uncomfortable? Address that first before you tell someone else. You need to fix yourself in order to make you uncomfortable. So that applies in the workplace too. People who look at someone who is more curvy or who is fat and says that is not an appropriate way for you to dress. But say if Emily was wearing something and an individual who was on the bigger side or the curvier side wore the same thing, that might not be appropriate to some people. And what is the reason behind that? It's our own biases and a feeling of ownership over women's bodies just for existing, of certain body parts being sexualized when they shouldn't be. And so addressing that in yourself is part one. And I would highly advise employers or like you all as future professionals to analyze what's making you think that that person is unprofessional. Is it actually them? Is it their behavior and what they bring to the table? Or is it your own experiences and biases affecting your judgment?
Thank you all so much for that engaged conversation. You actually had already answered the next question that I had for Logan. So we can go ahead and move forward. There's one last question, and this is for the entire panel. So we're going to do a little scenario since you guys have a lot of meat to work with. A new employee started at your place of work, and you are a leader in the office. Many of the staff have come to you with complaints about an odor this individual is producing. The company policy clearly states that a good personal hygiene is required in the workplace. You have been asked by your manager to resolve the issue. How would you approach this individual and why?
I'll start, if that's okay. I've actually had a similar situation. I think the most important thing is to do it privately, is to pull them aside privately. You don't want to address something like that on other folks, even though other folks are probably thinking the same thing, which is related. But you address it privately and you address it directly. And those are really my three key things. And I would approach somebody and say, you know, I just need to let you know because I would want to know if this was me and I wasn't aware that my clothing smells like sour washing. Sometimes that happens. You leave it in the washer, it smells sour or good. And I want to know if that was me, so I just need to let you know that you have this, you have a odor that's coming from wherever it's coming from, and it's very distracting. So I wanted to check in on you and make sure you're okay. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can support you with?
I can go next, just because I will have to hop off for a meeting. But I think for me, working in higher education, the first thing is just checking in on the students' wellness. Just because the majority of students I employ are part-time employees, they're not benefits eligible, so I don't know where they're at with their personal and financial plates. So really just making sure that I'm starting with a more general wellness check before I go straight into this one situation, because the likelihood is that there's other things going on that are preventing that. Maybe they don't have the resources at their disposal, or maybe they're working multiple jobs and they're just coming from overnight shifts or things such as that, because that happens a lot of times with students. You work odd hours a day, you pull overnighters for courses, right? So I think the first thing is as was mentioned, coming from a place of empathy, coming from a place of getting the whole picture of what's going on, and then if it is strictly I'm not recognizing it, but I am okay, I am in a good place, then as was mentioned, addressing it specifically within a private setting.
I have to add one thing. So my son plays hockey, and he's a 15-year-old boy. And he came home from practice Tuesday night, immediately just started out the door to go to chest club. And I said, you're showering, right? Keep your shirt, like, I said, somebody smells like that. So a lot of students just kind of wear it right, it's not even thinking things through.
Yeah, and to add on that, here's that we should be doing. Yeah, so I think with empathy is the biggest thing, as well as like not targeting the person. Not be like, you're stinky, and like fix it. It's mostly gonna be like, hey, very similar where I've noticed that there has been some kind of odor. Just want to make sure like if that person like is actually able to afford a different kind of detergent, maybe they don't have a washing machine. It's just really depending on the situation and like really pinpointing the case and like how to help and like giving resources on things that you can do to make sure that you're prepared for the workspace. Just items like that to make sure that the student or in the workforce an employee does not feel targeted or offended. So it all just really depends on the situation, their living space, their relationship with said people in living space, means of transportation, if they have sports after, or other extracurricular activities, or recreational hobbies as well. It all just really depends.
All right, guys, thank you very much for that. Did you have something?
Yeah, well, was there somewhere a person had something smelly for breakfast and the boss just discreetly gave the person some, like, good sucking candies to help with their breath. He just like, here, try this.
Listen, they have a budget